Alright, welcome to Feisty Chess. Today I want to show you a game I'm quite proud of. I played it in 2017 against a good friend of mine in a tournament here in Iowa. It was against Darr-Potter. So I had the white pieces, and you're seeing it from that perspective, and I played the Smith-Morra Gambit. This is maybe my first Smith-Morra Gambit in tournament play when I started picking it up. So let's go through it. Here's the Smith-Morra Gambit. White plays d4 on move 2 against the Sicilian defense. Black naturally takes. And then white gambits this c-pawn. And black accepts. And in this game, that's what happened. So here's the starting position for the Morra Gambit. This game will illustrate a lot of the same concepts that were illustrated in my Blitz match with Queen Trade. Although it is a different variation, you still got these sacrificial themes on the e6 square. But what's great about this gambit, and what I love about the Morra Gambit, is one of the defects of the Sicilian is that Black has gotten, with his first move, Black has gotten no closer to getting his king castled and getting his kingside developed. He still has to move a pawn in front of a bishop, play knight f6, move the bishop, and then castle. So it takes him 4 moves. Now White's got a lead in that area here because he's played e4, but maybe more importantly, both of White's bishops can come out. He already has a knight out. He has one less pawn, but look at Black. He has moved one piece, his c-pawn, and that is now off the board. Whereas White is going to be way ahead in development because those bishops will flow out very freely. White's king will be safe. So let's see how the game went. So the usual move here is knight to c6. That's probably the best way to play. And my opponent played something called the Chicago defense. And usually knight to c6 is better to include in that defense. Because the way he played it is the old-fashioned way, and it's pretty dubious, actually. So in our game, my opponent played e6, and I played knight f3. The move order isn't super important here, but just so we get this right, d6, now bishop to c4. So White is going to continue with his knight to c3, knight to f3, and bishop c4 almost always. Black has adopted a small center here on the 6th rank, on his 3rd rank, and it's called the Scheveningen formation. Okay, so Black to move again, plays a 3rd pawn move, a6, and now White just castles. And look at the stark difference in development now. Black has played only pawn moves, White is nearly completely developed. He just needs to move his queen's bishop and maybe his queen, but he is ready to go. Black played another pawn move, but one that actually does something, forces White's hand a little bit. b5, and now dropping back, bishop to b3. And now the definitive move of the Chicago defense, rook to a7. Kind of a funky move, but all these pawn moves are intended to allow this rook maneuver. And the idea is he's going to bring this rook to d7. And White's okay with that, but he's going to break the pawn because the usual plan in the Morra is for White to shoot down the d-file with the rook opposing this enemy queen. And it's difficult for the queen to find a decent spot. So the queen can stay happily on d8 if we can get this rook to d7, and then there's no more pin. And actually, Black is the one that wants to break open the d-file. So White's okay with this because he can continue to get his pieces out, and now with tempo on the rook. So now White's got all of his minor pieces out. The rook does come to d7. And Black has moved a bunch of pawns and one piece, and it's a rook at that. So there's just something kind of fishy about this. Because White hasn't played knight to c6 yet, White can make a move centralizing his knight and preventing Black from playing knight to c6. So I go with knight d4. This also targets e6, which is really critical. So notice that the rook sitting on d7 has interfered with this bishop's protection of e6. So that was just one pawn protecting this, and we've got 2 minor pieces on e6. And if we have either minor piece landing on that after sacrificing the other, looks pretty powerful. Either one, a knight or a bishop here, would prevent black from castling and would create a lot of tactical threats that'd be difficult to deal with. Okay, so black probably wants to play knight c6, so the next step is to play bishop b7. And now I go with queen e2. Probably a more active move here and a better move is just f4, getting on with this kingside pawn storm plan and trying to crack open the game quickly. Because look, black is still a long way from castling here. His king will be in the center for the next several moves at least. But I finished my development with queen e2. I don't think it's a bad move, but it's maybe not the best. Okay. Now black starts getting out his kingside pieces and is attacking this e4 pawn twice, once with the knight, once with the bishop. So I need to either defend this or sacrifice it. And if I'm going to play like f3 to defend here, that's just kind of like giving up the game in the sense that I gambited this pawn and I'm not going to play for a real initiative. I'm not going to use the compensation I have. I'm going to kind of hunker down. I mean, f3 might not be a terrible move. It might be the computer recommended move here, but I went with f4, which is probably what I should have played last move. And again, the idea is we want to, well, there's a lot of ideas here. We can now push e5, but probably we want to go f5 because this d file is no longer one we want to pry open with this rook sitting on it. But there's another idea to f4, which we'll see in the game. f4 also, you'll note, gives up this e pawn. It's only defended once. And black goes ahead and takes a natural looking move. Now is the opportune time for the sacrifice. With the e-pawn not there, f5 doesn't have as much of a sting. Well, I don't know, maybe f5 is a good move here. But anyway, I went for the immediate sacrifice, and I sacrificed the knight on e6. So in my games with queen trade, I mostly sacrificed the bishop because he was playing a somewhat different line. A lot of times it's better to have the knight there, but in this case, and the knight might be good to sacrifice the bishop first and to recapture with the knight. Oh, hold on, there's a bit of an intermezzo here. So there's no check here. And my opponent played a clever intermezzo of knight takes, which avoids any kind of discovery tactics that I could unleash on this queen, on this knight with the queen lined up. And I also can't take his queen here or do anything other than check white. So I need to recapture. So I recaptured that knight. Now my opponent, because note, when he if I take his queen, he takes my queen. Well, that's taking my queen with check, and I'm going to be a piece down with not a whole lot to show for it with queens off the board. So I need to take that, damage my structure, but who cares about your pawn structure when you're sacrificing whole pieces? So here we go. And the reason I wanted the bishop here is because the bishop is now hitting this rook. And that's something. Black wants to preserve his material advantage. And note, the material situation here is we now have an equal number of pawns, but black has this extra piece, an extra knight. But white also has a big initiative. He might do well to actually play bishop e7 here and just let white take that rook, because that bishop is really powerful in preventing castling. I might not even take the rook in this position. I might just leave the bishop here to prevent black from castling. So, but instead black played rook e7, and now I simply follow up, and this is the point of f4 with f5. And my bishop is kind of cemented here on e6, preventing black from castling. And this rook sitting on e7 is kind of disrupting his whole game plan. This is probably a bad idea because of bishop here. So black at this point decides, okay, I'm going to get rid of this bishop. Be a lot easier to have a pawn there. And I'm still at material. I've sacrificed the exchange back, but now I'm up 2 pieces for a rook. So how does white continue here? How does black continue here? Well, logically, bishop to e7. Now look, the bishop is gone, but still white can't castle because this rook's f-file is now opened up all the way. But maybe some kind of rook f8 idea is possible and trading off pieces. Maybe black will be able to clear his queen out and slide his king over to the queen side and find some safety there. Then I go bishop d4, hitting this weak pawn. And Clark decides he needs to give up that pawn, because if he needs to give up at least a pawn on the king side, because if he tries this, there's this queen check and then this, and now I'm hitting the rook, and this can't be good for him. He's not only lost a pawn, but his king is under even more pressure. So he first clears some space for his king by moving his queen to c7. So now I take here, and I'm hitting this rook. So rook goes to g8. Now queen h5 can be met by king to d8, which is what happens in the game. And now queen takes h7. So it looks like the rook needs to move again, and white's won both of those pawns. So white's looking pretty good here, but Clark finds a very good move before he deals with that rook. He throws a check at me, queen to c5. So I have three legal moves here, three ways to get out of this check. Bishop d4, rook f2, and the simple king h1. I'd encourage you to pause the video and think about which one of these is best. This is actually a really critical moment in the game. Looks like the tide is turning white's way, but this is actually one of the more interesting points, and a really good way to... it was a good move by Clark, good way to find chances. So pause the video, see which move you play. Okay. Let's look at them in turn. Well, the problem with bishop to d4, it does hit the queen, but white's rook and bishop now are a brutalizing force against my king, and I have to move. I have no other move than moving into this check, and this is actually just going to be mate very quickly. I mean, the rook could go almost anywhere on this file, and I have to block with the rook. I may be able to block with the queen, but the checkmate will look something like this. So king h1 is right out. All right, you can't play that. I'm sorry, that's bishop d4. Bishop d4 because it opens up this rook. How about king h1? Well, the problem with king h1 is similar. Black can sacrifice here. Bishop takes b7, and now there's nothing but capturing that bishop. And now he has this. It's not a real sacrifice at all. And I better go back to the corner unless I fancy getting my king way out in the middle of the board and ravage that way. But now, black wins his piece back, this bishop on g7. And he's hitting my queen. I could come here and check, but same story. And he's threatening mate. I can try something like this, but lo and behold, the queen is going to come here, and this is just bad news. Actually, there might be something better. Anyway, black has won his piece back, and now white's king is just as unsafe, and black has these two pieces for the rook. So king h1 also no go, not the right move. So rook f2, sorry, here's the position, the check. Rook f2 is the only move in that position that preserves any kind of advantage. And after this, black still needs to take care of his rook on g8, and the only place that's safe is e8, which is good. It's a good square for the rook, guards the bishop an extra time here, shields the king, and is protected by the king. Okay. Now I can play bishop to d4, unpinning my rook, attacking black's queen, and here's where Clark makes a mistake. He centralizes his queen with queen to d5. Now this hits the e6 pawn, which is logical. It makes sense. You want to make some of your own threats. But better would have been queen to c6 or queen back to c7 even. Probably queen to c6. I'm sorry, there's a bishop. We're missing a bishop here. Okay. So after rook f2, black has to move his rook now that the bishop is properly on the board. Now bishop to d4. White goes here. c6 would have been a better square because of the following continuation, which happened in the game. Actually, there's a really neat combination here if you want to try to... White can win a piece. If you want to try to pause your video. So do that if you want to see how white can win a piece. Okay, so the move I found over the board was bishop b6 check. This leaves black only one, because of this advanced pawn, black only has one move, king to c8. And now, if you didn't find it earlier, maybe you can find it now. But the right move is queen takes e7. So we're just going to grab that bishop. The point is, take here, the rook comes to the back rank, and this is mate. Once the rook interposes, that's game over, thanks to this bishop and that pawn. It's a beautiful mate, actually. Nice back rank mate. So here's our rook, here's the queen, and here's the bishop. So we play queen takes e7. So of course Clark saw that, and he tried queen c6, attacking the bishop and defending the rook. And I found the simple continuation, keeping an eye on this rook, but getting out of the rook's attack, and still protecting my pawn with queen f7. So now black can't take this bishop because his rook will hang. And at this point, black is down the exchange. He's no longer up 2 pieces for the rook. He's down in exchange because he lost one of his pieces. And I've got 3 more pawns to boot. And not, on top of that, his pieces are pretty immobilized. This knight still hasn't developed and still has no squares it can go to. So at this point, Clark resigned. But it was such a great game and such a good illustration of the Morra Gambit. It's one of my favorite games I've played. And judging by Clark's immediate reaction, I think it was one of the favorite games he played as well, despite being on the losing end of it. It was just a fun game with that sacrifice on e6. So a nice little sample of what the Morra can do for you. And remember, in that move order, I played queen e2 instead of f4, which is the book move I couldn't remember. But even then, I had all this energy in the position. And it didn't take black, but a couple of mistakes by black to get into a losing position here. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this game. I definitely enjoyed the game. I hope you enjoyed this format of actually seeing it on the tournament board. This might have been the board the game was played on, come to think of it, my red tournament board. So, anyway. This is a nice feisty game for the channel, and I hope all of you stay feisty. Take care.